Good morning, children. In my previous video, I told you about the composition of blood. The blood is composed of two parts, the liquid part called blood plasma and the formed cellular part, the blood cells. Blood plasma we had done. Along with that, we had done the functions of blood. And now today I will start with the formed cellular elements. Formed or cellular elements are shaped structures visible under the microscope as cells, and cell-like structures present in the blood are formed cellular elements. They form about 42 to 45% of the blood, and they are of three types. Three types of blood cells are there, and these blood cells, they float in the liquid part of blood called blood plasma. These three types of blood cells are red blood cells, also called erythrocytes scientifically. White blood cells is common name, and biologically scientific term is leukocytes. And blood platelets, also called thrombocytes. Today we will do the red blood cells, RBCs or red blood corpuscles called erythrocytes. Red blood cells are very small, measuring about 7.7 micron millimeter in diameter and biconcave in shape. Biconcave is this shape. It is of this shape. Disc-like with no nucleus in the cells. Nucleus is absent in the mammalian blood. Red blood cells are most abundant of all the three types of cells. In our blood, it is the number of red blood cells are maximum compared to other two blood cells. They are about 5 to 5.4 million per cubic millimeter in the blood of a man, and in a woman about 4 to 4.5 million per millimeter cube in the blood. Young immature red blood cells, newly formed red blood cells do have nucleus. Nucleus is present, mitochondria is present, endoplasmic reticulum is present, and other cell organelles also. But as the cell matures, red blood cell matures, during maturation, these cell organelles, that is nucleus, mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum, they disappear so as to accommodate more hemoglobin for the transportation of oxygen. Moreover, small size, they are very small in size, and the biconcave shape on either side of these cells provide more surface area for the efficient absorption of oxygen. So red blood cells, small in size and biconcave in shape, helps in, with no nucleus in it, helps in increasing its surface area, thus makes it more efficient in absorbing more of oxygen. The small size, its size is so small that these cells, because of their small size, they can pass through the very narrow blood capillaries. Erythrocytes or red blood cells are red in color because of the presence of a respiratory pigment, hemoglobin. It is present in this hemoglobin is present in the spongy body or stroma of red blood cells. That is the space surrounded by the membrane, the inside space of each red blood cell is filled up with this respiratory pigment called hemoglobin. That inside space, which is filled with a ground substance, cytoplasmic fluid-like substance, is called stroma of the red blood cells. Hemoglobin actually is a compound which is composed of hematin, an iron containing pigment, and globin, a protein. So it is a combination of an iron and protein. Hemoglobin has a great affinity, strong attraction for oxygen. It forms an unstable compound, oxyhemoglobin with oxygen. This oxyhemoglobin separates into hemoglobin and oxygen in the body cells, and oxygen is supplied to the cells and hemoglobin remains there in the red blood cells. Red blood cells can also carry carbon dioxide along with it. This hemoglobin can combine with carbon dioxide also of the red blood cells, but in very small quantity. So it can carry very small amount of carbon dioxide in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, HbCO2. Again, it is an unstable compound. Now, these functions of red blood cells or erythrocytes. The red blood cells perform the following functions. It helps in transportation of oxygen. Hemoglobin in the cytoplasm of erythrocytes help in the transportation of oxygen from the respiratory organ to the body cells. So red blood cells will absorb oxygen. That oxygen will get to attach to the hemoglobin and will move in the blood as oxyhemoglobin to reach to the body cells, where this oxyhemoglobin, being an unstable compound, will break up again into oxygen and hemoglobin. Oxygen will be supplied to the body cells and hemoglobin will remain as such in the red blood cells. Second function is transportation of carbon dioxide. About 23% of carbon dioxide produced in the cells is carried from the tissues, that is body cells, to respiratory organs for the elimination of erythrocytes. This carbon dioxide, when taken by the blood, will again enter into the red blood cells, will take it, and the hemoglobin, carbon dioxide will combine with the hemoglobin as an unstable compound, carbaminohemoglobin, and will travel as such. When it will reach to the respiratory organ, being an unstable compound, it will break up into hemoglobin and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide will be released into the respiratory organ and hemoglobin will remain there in the red blood cells. The formation, life and destruction of red blood cells. About 1% RBCs are produced daily in our body, and the same number is being destroyed. In adults, the red blood cells are produced in the red bone marrow of long bones, especially in ribs, breastbone and ilium of the hip bones. But in an embryo, that is the developmental stage of a individual, that is an unborn child, these are produced in the liver and spleen. During maturation, the erythrocytes in mammals, when these red blood cells are newly formed, they will have all the cell organelles. But when they will mature, they will lose their nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum to accommodate more and more of hemoglobin, and more of hemoglobin, more efficiently it can absorb oxygen. Now, due to the loss of nucleus, the life of erythrocytes is reduced to only 120 days. So its lifespan is 120 days. That is its age. The old, worn out red blood cells or erythrocytes are destroyed in the liver, spleen and bone marrow. In human beings, in adults, these are the parts where the old, injured, weak red blood cells, they are being taken to these parts and they are being broken down. They are destroyed. When they are destroyed, then the iron part of hemoglobin is stored in the liver cells, whereas the rest is excreted as bile pigments, bilirubin and biliverdin. The red blood cells, when breaks up, when it is broken down by the liver cells or spleen, then it breaks up into iron and the bile pigment. Now, carbon hemoglobin has a strong attraction for carbon monoxide. It is said that hemoglobin has 250 times more affinity, more attraction for carbon monoxide as compared to oxygen. And once hemoglobin comes in contact with carbon monoxide, it forms a stable compound, carboxyhemoglobin. When this stable compound is formed, this compound will cut the availability of hemoglobin for oxygen, because hemoglobin has formed a stable compound with carbon monoxide. So no more separate hemoglobin is there to take in oxygen. So reducing the transportation of oxygen, and this may cause death of a person. This is called carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, infants, they have large number of red blood cells compared to adults because that is their growing age, and the respiratory activity is fast to release more and more energy for the growth. As a result, more of oxygen is required. Faster is the rate of respiration, more oxygen is required, so more of red blood cells in their body. Red blood cells count is lowered by 5% during sleep because the body activity slows down. No extra physical activity is taking place. Even the basic metabolic activities also slows down. So no, we do not require more energy. So slow of respiratory activity, less of oxygen intake, red blood cells count is lowered. Red blood cells count increases during physical activity, during pregnancy and emotional stress, because more energy is required for that. For more energy, this respiratory activity should be more. So more of respiratory activity, more will be the intake of oxygen. So more red blood cells are required. Increase in red blood cells count above normal number is called, person suffers from a condition called polycythemia, and decrease in the RBC count than the normal number, the person suffers from a condition called erythropenia. The loss of nucleus in a mature red blood cells, nucleus is absent. The cell loses its nucleus. This is a blessing to the red blood cells in disguise. How? This will make the red blood cells biconcave in shape. So this will, as a result, it will increase the surface area for the absorption of more of oxygen and makes them more efficient in carrying its function. Loss of mitochondria also increases efficiency of the red blood cells by making it anaerobic in respiration. You have studied in class 9th that the respiratory activity takes place in two phases. That in first it is glycolysis, then Krebs cycle. The first part takes place in cytoplasm, then the remaining chemical reactions takes place in new mitochondria. Now these red blood cells do not have mitochondria. So it will not be utilizing oxygen that we have taken in for its respiratory activity. As a result, the large amount of oxygen is being given to the body cells. So you'll find no oxygen is used by the red blood cells for their own respiration, and the whole of it is transported to the body cells. In children, the red blood cells are produced in bone marrow of all bones up to the age of 6 years, in all the bone marrow of all the bones. So this was all about the red blood cells. and tomorrow I will be taking white blood cells. Thank you.